Thank you, Ruthie. It's good to be back. Okay. I call this regular meeting of the Intermediate District 287 School Board to order. It is Thursday, April 14th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. My name is Crystal Brackey, and I am board chair. And I'm going to read the mission statement this evening because I am just back from missing several meetings. I have no idea who has been reading it, and I didn't arrange for anybody to read it tonight in advance, so I'm just going to own that. The mission of Intermediate District 287 is to be the premier provider of innovative specialized services to ensure that each member district can meet the unique learning needs of its students. And now we'll have board member introductions. Would you be willing to start us off?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Kuntz, and I represent the Orono School District.
Hello, I'm Heidi Marty, and I represent West Tonka School Board District.
Sam Stanton, Robbinsville 281.
Good evening, Ruthie Dallas, representing Brooklyn Center Community Schools.
And I'm Crystal Brackey from Richfield Public Schools.
Shannon Andreessen, representing Hopkins Public Schools.
Ann Casey, proudly representing St. Louis Park.
Jackie Mosqueda Jones, representing District 279, Osseo Area Schools.
Board member Francesca Pagan Umar from Eden Prairie will be here shortly. She encountered a bit of traffic on the way. And board members Sarah Johansson and Regina Neville are unable to be here this evening. And thank you so much to all of the staff who are with us in person and virtually. We are excited to be with you tonight. The first item on the agenda is approval of our agenda this evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right, I will give the motion to Ruthie. And where did that second come from? Okay, we have a motion by Ruthie Dallas and a second by Heidi Marty. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the meeting agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is open forum for community comments. I do not believe we had anybody request or come tonight to address the board. Is that the case? Okay, thank you. We move to approval of the consent agenda containing routine business items. So unless there is an item on the consent agenda that somebody would like removed for individual discussion, we can entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Sam Sant and a second by Ruthie Dallas. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the consent agenda is approved. And believe it or not, that is the last action item that we have on our agenda this evening. So we have lots of great information and proposals ahead and are looking forward to that. And we are going to start with sharing the success and recognition. So I'm going to turn this over to our superintendent.
Thank you. Board members, you may remember if you were here at the last meeting that we introduced you to John Fila. He was a candidate and is a candidate for Minnesota Teacher of the Year, sponsored by Ed Minnesota. And since the last meeting, we've learned that he is now a finalist. So that and alone is a great honor. And within a very short period of time, we'll know who actually ends up being the Teacher of the Year. He couldn't be here tonight, but he asked that we share this short video that he did as part of his application. So John Fila.
English teacher from Intermediate District 287. If learning during a global pandemic were not hard enough, just weeks ago our district was one of the latest to suffer the tragedy of a school shooting. I was a student at Stoneman Douglas where the Parkland, Florida shooting took place. And seeing images where I spent time as a learner, and now at a site in my own district where my colleagues are now connected to those events, isn't just heartbreaking, it causes despair. Each person experiences those feelings differently, so flexibility in how we address mental health is key. Due dates and district calendars should not be what prevents us from the support we need. Life doesn't always align with district calendars, so I'm proud when leaders in my district alter the routine and ditch meeting agendas to prioritize our needs. In the Minnesota Safe Learning Survey results, respondents wanted to see more done in terms of prevention and intervention related to harassment, self-harm, and suicide. Teacher workload and assignments for learners were also concerns. I've experienced those same concerns as a student, a teacher, and as a parent. Minnesota schools fall short of the ratio of one school counselor for every 250 students recommended by the American School Counseling Association. Issues like these are causing contentious negotiations across the state and have led to at least one strike. Public awareness around mental health is important. Hearing this topic addressed recently on NPR and in the Star Tribune is cause for hope. We desperately need the state to fully fund district special education costs to cover the shift in responsibility from the state and county provided services to public schools. Schools have become the mental health system for Minnesota students who receive special education services. Students have the best chance at success, and the adults around them are supportive as well. For staff, we need to normalize sick days, training in trauma-informed practices, social emotional learning, conflict resolution, and in training teachers as counselors. Retention and recruitment of teachers happens when they see us demonstrate that support across our district. We're developing a broad mental health leadership team whose goal is to inform the work we're doing related to mental health district-wide. We should be mindful that the consequences of mental health not being addressed are even worse for students of color and students in the LGBTQ+ community. The compounded impact of the pandemic, community violence on Black and Brown students will continue to impact the achievement gap unless we address the causes of inequities in our roles in perpetuating them. I've dedicated myself to this work from a leadership role on our equity team, the development of a mental health course, to work on accessibility and availability of digital curriculum that allows for the kind of flexibility we need. Students who need a break or fall behind now have more resources to get caught up when they're ready. Many students from marginalized groups choose to enroll in our programs directly related to the supports we offer in these areas. Demonstration of care builds community and trust to get through difficult and at times seemingly insurmountable life circumstances. Thank you for your time and for allowing me to bring further attention to this issue.
That really gives you a good snapshot of John and his advocacy that he's provided over many, many years, and now doing it at the state level. So I think we all want him to have the very best experience coming up in the coming weeks, and we'll just see where it all ends, and you'll hear an update, I'm sure, again in a coming board meeting. So very proud of him, very proud of him. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a wonderful video just to get a sense of both what's shared with the people who are charged with making this decision, but also just to see and hear how he's speaking about his experiences here at 287.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Next up is the superintendent's report, so I will turn it right back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have two informational reports that I'm very excited to have you here tonight, and two are really central to our strategic initiatives. And I'm going to turn it over to Ben McGrath to introduce the first topic, and he'll bring his colleague Tanya Allen in for the second one. So welcome, Ben.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent Lewandowski, Board Chair Brockie, members of the board, colleagues, guests. Thank you for coming in and allowing me to speak with you and share with you an update to our work to become a more data-driven organization, and specifically tonight to give you an update on the way that we are making our data more transparent and more public for our various stakeholders. Before I share any information on what is just about 8 or 9 slides, I want to introduce our team that meets every Friday, scheduled for an hour. It goes longer, and have put in lots of time over the last year plus to create the data dashboard that you're going to see tonight. And many times in leadership positions that you end up being the spokesperson for the great things that happen in our district. That's true in the case of when we talk about the work between teachers and ESPs and students. It's also the case here today that the people doing the work, sometimes in the background, usually in the background, have built this data dashboard from the ground up. And they've really been the ones who have made this a reality and deserve all of the credit for the work that's gone into what you'll see tonight. Members of our team, Kim Helgeson, our Director of Technology and SIS, Annie Mitty is our district assessment coordinator. Brandon Peterson, information systems architect. And Greg Crone, also an information systems architect. This is the team that's put a lot of this together with the help of feedback from colleagues across the district. The team that you see here are the creators of our dashboard and the future creators of what it will be as we go forward. There's just about kind of 4 things that I'm going to cover here. First, just a little bit of background information. And then I'll touch on some strategies and practices that we have in our district to become more data-driven. I'm going to ask you for a little bit of a self-reflection that you can think about, or you can write down how you see fit. I'll ask you some demographic questions about the students that we serve in 287. And then we'll jump in and actually show you the dashboard, show you the kind of the live working version. I'll ask Annie to come up with me at that time to help work through the dashboard, and we'll show you a few highlights of what we have in store for you. Really simply, keep it in good practice, good educator teaching practice, learning intentions, just simply for you to be able to demonstrate an understanding of the data dashboard as we close out the next 20 minutes or so. I think it's important to go back, particularly for new board members, but perhaps for everybody here, and just remind you that this work is connected to our 2015-2020 strategic plan. And specifically what you see there, strategy 1, where we will design and implement a student outcome measurement system so that each member district can ensure its students' unique learning needs are met. Now, I don't want to at all say that we didn't have a more transparent and public data system in the past in 2015 or in 2017 or 2020. The one we have that we're going to show you tonight, we believe is the best iteration, the best version of how we've made that data more organized and, again, more public and accessible. I also want to highlight what I mentioned earlier, that the work of the data dashboards are credit to the team, and this team's a cross-departmental team that Annie and I work on the student outcomes part of our organization. Kim, Brandon, and Greg work on the technology part of our organization. And we believe that partnership is really what's allowed us to be able to get this work going faster, to take that 2015-2020 objective and make it a reality in the version that you'll see tonight and the coming versions in the future. I mentioned when I first started that it's part of a broader goal about becoming a more data-driven organization. And one of our goals is that we're going to continue to advance our district and improve the outcomes for our students, specifically on becoming more data-driven and having something like the dashboard as a tool and resource for us. We believe that accessible public displaying of data allows us to better measure, to monitor, and to respond to the data, and specifically use that to drive and respond to the needs of our students. Just to highlight a few of those strategies to become more data-driven. One, I've been mentioning this more public and accessible version of data. One that doesn't live at a district office, or if you send a few different emails, but one that folks have a website address to and can pull up the data themselves and use it for whatever purposes they have. The process of making data more accessible also helps to drive a crucial part of our improvement work, and that's to improve the quality of data input, usually between a student and a teacher or somebody else at the building level. A good example of that is our attendance data. When we started to make our attendance data more accessible and public and talk about it in meetings, it drove the improvement of data collection. Teachers did a better job of taking attendance when we were looking at the attendance rates of our students. And that's been a big part of this work, is improving the quality of the data input. The old saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. If you're not putting good data in, it's going to be difficult to get good data out. We've also been working on training leaders and other staff on data analysis, things like the cycle of continuous improvement on the screen. Our version of Plan, Do, Study, Act is analyze, plan, implement, evaluate, and adjust. So things like that have been really helpful as we train our leaders to be consumers of data and respond to data. There's also some specific practices that we've put in place. One that you're familiar with likely, and that is our school improvement plans at each of our sites, but also our strategic implementation plan. Those are our SIPs for our district departments. In both of those cases, we've asked them to write SMART-T goals, maybe not just the SMART goal acronym that you're familiar with, but the I and the E for inclusion and equity. And when we talk about SMART-T goals for our SIPs at the building and at the district level, they need data to be able to write those goals and see whether or not they've met those goals. And the second part that I'm proud of how this work is emerging, that's our version of multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. You may have heard that term. We call it responsive systems of support. I'm happy to report that this year, one of our goals for our sites to all have a data team that was looking at data, pulling up data, and identifying interventions to help students become better. All of our sites now have a data team. One of the reasons this has been such a work in progress is that, as you know, that we are we serve students with unique needs. And most of our vendors and products that we use that are used in K-12 educational systems, they're geared for traditional organizations. And because what may be an edge case that they could problem solve in a member district is really a lot of our cases, and that's meant sometimes a little more work for Brandon and Greg and Annie. It's one of the reasons this progress maybe has felt slower at times if we go back to 2015 in that 2015-2020 strategic plan. But these guys are great, and they're finding ways to continue to work around and integrate systems, and so we have one place to go for our data. All right, here's your quiz. Write it down or just kind of think to yourself, and the goal here is just a little bit of self-reflection. How many federal setting 4 students do we have in District 287? Roughly, what are the racial demographics of our students? So far this year, how many out-of-school suspensions? Percentage of students that identify as male, and percentage of students receiving free or reduced price lunch. I have no prizes for winners, but there's no penalty if you don't get them right either. We're going to come back to that in just a minute and answer those questions as part of our little tour. Come on over, Annie. Let Annie do the driving here on the computer. I'll step aside. I'm also going to ask her to jump in a little bit as we go as well. So what you're seeing here is the live version of our dashboard. This is the landing page for when you would first go to access this platform. So far, and this is still a work in progress, So far, what you can see is we have student attendance. We have reading assessments, which are A reading and MAP reading tests combined. The student engagement instrument, the number of reintegrating students and reintegrated students. You heard from Elizabeth, I think, last time on that. Our restrictive procedures, we're going to come back to that in a minute. If you don't already know, our restrictive procedure is a physical restraint. Math assessment, same thing, A math, MAP, math, enrollment head count. And there's your first answer.
That's much lower than
The
I thought.
number of suspensions that we've had this year so far is 17. If I could, I would put a little asterisk next to the graduation number. I was just talking about how, what some of maybe those edge cases in member districts are kind of a lot of ours here. And that actually kind of came up a little bit in the same way in this number for graduations, because we sort of say, well, how do we define that? And Elizabeth and I even had a conversation about what it looked like, for example, if a student went here through 12th grade, but then did transition services back in their member district, and what do we call that, and making sure that we have that right. So again, in some of these cases, I'd like to put a little asterisk because there's things that we're still working through. As we pull this up, and before we go to those quiz answers, I think it's worth saying, especially as you're starting to see some numbers, and if you have a member district mindset here, then you might be thinking like, boy, those aren't the kinds of numbers that I think I might be seeing back in my district. And so I just want to name that, of course, all of our students have come to us because their member districts haven't served them well enough, right? Or we're not able to serve them well enough. And so when they come to us, they're already at a different kind of starting place. I don't at all want to say that we're absolving ourselves of responsibility for growth and a lot of growth for our students. I just want to kind of name that reality so that, when we dig in about attendance and you see 66%, for sure we want to improve that. And I want to put it in context. Let's go back to the demographic questions, and Annie's going to jump us over to some answers here. I can't actually see that very well. Annie, maybe you can more than I can. The students by division. So setting for special education students, if you had
478.
478, you are correct. 478. And free reduced price lunch, if you guessed.
Ooh, well, 346 plus, I don't know, let's call that, oh, plus 35. That's the reduced. So free is 346 plus 35 is 381.
Together, 40%, right?
81. 381.
381.
40%, 381. Okay, and let's see, I think we asked about gender. What is that, 60 what?
646, it's 60. Oop.
61%, I think.
That's 61.
69.5, almost 70%.
So 70% of our students identify as male. And do we have one more question?
Did we ask for a race?
Yes, racial demographics.
Okay, so 44% white, 31% Black or African American, 12% Hispanic, 8% two or more races, 4% Asian, and then American Indian, Indigenous, and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander are very small. 1.8%, and I'm not going to be able to probably land. Oh, 0.32%.
So part of the reason that we just did that little bit of an activity with you and asked you to think about that is that we're wanting to prompt this kind of discussion on data more frequently. And I wanted to use it as a way to enter into what we want to show you. And that's just having demographic data organized in this way. And Elizabeth and others can attest to, sometimes we'd ask these demographic questions and we had to look in multiple places and we weren't really sure, like somebody else had the information. We had to go to Kim and say, hey, Kim. And so even just kind of what you just saw and what we're looking at now, having really accessible demographic data that we can just go to and use for a grant application or use to share with folks like you, that alone has been something that has been really helpful in the dashboard. Let's go back to our landing page. And we want to just dive into two things here. One is attendance. And so this is going to demonstrate at least part of what is one of the best features about what Brandon and Greg are doing. And that's our ability to get vertical with the data. So that number you're looking at now is district level aggregate data. But as soon as Annie clicks on it and goes in, the first disaggregation is by site. And so now you can see in Bremer and HTC, NEC, South, and West. Now, Annie's just going to go one more click and down disaggregate by race. And maybe two things here. One is that for this report, but in fact for any report that we've done on the dashboard that again, Brandon and Greg have created, our ability to disaggregate by race has been part of every step of the way. No matter what data we're looking at, we can disaggregate it all that race by race. And we're doing that because I know Annie and I were talking about this data actually earlier today. And well, you can talk about kind of what you saw, or I can. But when you drill down and look by race, we realized right away that we had a disproportionality issue. And again, maybe you can just highlight that in the. So again, this is, you're looking at attendance rate, and the red bar is below 69%.
So that's of our Black students, there are 62 at West and 42 or 70%, or 42 are attending at a rate of 69% or below. And we have the ability, we can click there and see who those students are. So teams can go in and look at, well, who are we looking at? They can start to think about why is this happening and what will we do to try to remediate that.
Before she clicks off the race disaggregation here, we're in one particular site, but when we looked at this, actually what we noticed that even when we look at it by site, that we had a race disproportionality issue in our attendance at all of our sites. It wasn't specific to the particular site that we just clicked on. When we went to the next site, it was the same thing. And our ability, again, just to do that kind of thing, for us to be able to take a piece of data, in this case attendance, disaggregate it by race, and then go back to our building leaders and work with them collaboratively to say, hey, here's an issue. Let's figure out how we can improve it. And in a lot of the work that Annie's been leading with our responsive systems of support team, they're using data, again, as Annie said, that we can drill down into it and see it organized by student. The student with the best attendance, the student with the worst attendance. And our data teams can look at that for their site and say, these students we need to plan our interventions for. These students are doing okay. We're not going to go into all of that just to keep student data, public student data out of a public meeting, but that ability to go vertical from the student level and pull up that individual student's attendance from the beginning of the year until now, and then zoom all the way up to the district level has been an important part of the design work as these guys have put this together.
You mentioned compliance earlier too, and we can watch compliance in this little pie chart. We can see how well we're doing taking attendance, which is another important piece of this.
Which has gotten a lot better.
So much better.
We're going to go to one more place, and then we'll see if you have any questions for us. And one closing slide, I believe, as well. So we go back and take a look at restrictive procedures. So you're looking at 5 years worth of data, the little key in the upper right of the screen, starting in 2017, 2018. Initial disaggregation is by building, and I believe you're going to show race disaggregation here as well.
Oops. Usually just do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll reset everything. Sorry, I think I clicked. Yep. So this is the district disaggregated by race.
We highlighted racial disproportionality earlier, and in this case, according to our demographics, right, that we're not seeing the same kind of disproportionality issue here like we saw with attendance. But again, that's what this allows us to do, is to immediately see where are our gaps and how are we going to develop interventions and practices to close those gaps, particularly between students of color and white students. Back to the landing page. Anything else we should share? Jump in. I'm going to go back to the presentation for one slide, and then we can come back to this and answer some questions. So I mentioned that we've been working on this for a little over a year, and we still have a lot of work in front of us. Some of the things that we're looking to develop on the dashboard in the relative near future is a place that we have our credit attainment for our students very well organized. Our behavior data currently lives in a platform called Swiss, and we believe that we can do that differently, and we can have behavior data here on this dashboard on what we call Power BI. Staff absences, specific site needs, for example, something that they might need or want for a school improvement plan. That's part of what we hope to do in the future. We also recognize that regular updates for this stakeholder group, as well as member district superintendents and perhaps special education directors, that we want to continue to improve on bringing data back to you and bringing data back to the superintendents and the directors, whether that be through access to the dashboard that we were just showing, or it's through quarterly reports on data, or however we see fit. But I want you to know that we're committed to making this more public and accessible to all of our other stakeholder groups. Two last ones here that we also want to see how our students are doing relative to their goals and objectives on their IEPs, and working with EdPlan. I know a big project, I know, but working with them in the near future so that we can see that progress and growth as well on the dashboard. And lastly, one of the other really big ones, that is role-based security. So when we only went so far, for example, with the restrictive procedure data, one of the reasons that we didn't organize it all the way down to the individual student level in the way that we did attendance is because right now everybody has the same level of access. So my login gets me the same thing as anybody else in the district. And what we want to do is layer that. And so district office folks will have certain level of access, but a teacher could still go in and see their own student data. So this role-based security is really important and a big one for our team to take on. But all of this is coming and much more. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions for me or my colleagues.
Thanks to all of you. Sandy, is there anything that you would like to share before we open it up for board members?
Just that I really want to congratulate the team. This has been a mammoth effort. And I think Ben mentioned in a K-12 district, typically you have salespeople coming to you and say, buy this system or get this system. They don't come to us with that. If they come to us, we say it's not going to work. And this effort was from the ground up, building something customized to our district in order to meet that strategic goal. And I couldn't be more proud of how far it's come and understand how much work and how many resources went in it to get to the data that our staff can use to benefit the students and their families and our member districts. So thank you all for your work.
I saw one hand already, so Francesca, you get to go first.
Okay, thank you. One, I really appreciate how difficult it is to get all of this in one place. It takes a lot of reporting from every single staff member at every level, and that can be really difficult depending on how much time they have and how much extra effort they have to put into their students. So I really I applaud everybody who helps to make this possible. And then organizing it, that's a lot. I did find it really interesting that when it came to restrictive procedures, we didn't see the disproportionality breakdown on race that we did with attendance. And I know nobody could say with complete certainty, but do you think that how many times restrictive procedures are used in this district is reflective of the work of the staff here, the work on equity and inclusion, working with students with their needs to get them to where they need to be so that that kind of stuff doesn't have to happen? And then, you know, attendance is kind of more reflective of what's going on in the community, what's going on in society. And so that's my first thought. My first thought is this shows you that there really is sincere effort here on that equity bit. Because when you go out into the world and you look at restrictive procedures done by the people in law enforcement who do restrictive procedures, we do see disproportionality. And the attendance rates are also. So I wonder, you know, getting them here, the stuff they've got to go through to get from home to here, the stuff their families have to go through to be able to get them prepared to go from home to here. That's all societal stuff. Once they come inside the doors, they're yours, they're ours. And it does seem to be. And that's what we want to see. We want to see kids being restricted only if they need to. We want to see it reflective of their needs, not race and gender and other stuff like that.
Yeah, thank you. A really good point that you're making. You know, I don't know for sure, but when I was mentioning data analysis and training our building leaders and other staff about how to use data, one of those other things that we've really been talking a lot about is root cause analysis. And sometimes we do that both with areas for growth and improvement to see those gaps that we're trying to improve, but it can also be helpful when we're looking at things going well and helping to understand why aren't we seeing, in this case, the kind of disproportionality that we do in other places and better understanding that question. So the way that we often talk about root cause analysis here is through the 5 why protocol, which you may be familiar with, just asking why is the reason 5 times. And we can do that when things are going well, in addition to when we're looking for those gaps. And so calling that out is a way that we can apply that strategy to better understand your perspective and points about the question about why we might not see the same kind of disproportionality. And I invite colleagues, Tanya, if you want to jump in, or Elizabeth, if you have perspective as well on that question.
I appreciate the observation, and you know, there are many variables. You're right. It's external and in our environment, and what's in our control and what's not in our control. So I just appreciate you bringing that.
I also appreciate that perspective because my first thought when I saw that difference was, well, what about suspensions? What's the disproportionality within that? Do we have that?
We do have that, and one of the reasons that Annie didn't click on that is because that if I was to do that, you would be able to see that race disaggregation, but it also it also disaggregates the data down to, I believe, classroom level or tier for sure, site and tier, site and classroom. It's potentially identifiable information on one
Right.
click down. So the answer is yes, we have that data disaggregated by race. I don't know it off the top of my head. Maybe somebody else is looking at it. I just can't go to it right now.
So I was just wondering, what's the overlap between restrictive procedures and suspensions? And yeah, are the rates similar or different, or is one balancing out the other, perhaps? That was my
Fully rolling out an RSS and MTSS process with all the student intervention. I'm happy to run the percentage for you. I have the raw numbers for the suspended with
Tanya just did the math super fast, and so we already have it. 59% students of color of those suspensions, and 41% white. So if you go back to that demographic slide, and I can do it.
It's 56 by 44. Is it general?
That does sound interesting. I can't remember the number.
Yeah, the general pop is, the general demographics is 56% BIPOC, 44% white, so 59% BIPOC. Well, the suspension is a little bit. How does that work?
But this data, this version of the dashboard is updated yesterday. I think that we're adding to this as we go. So this is this version or something close to this version has really only been out for the last couple of months probably. And so we're really just now being able to get into some of this data with our building leaders. But
Yeah, Sandy's going to say something that I'm also, if there's feedback for the folks that are watching, just know it's trying to be fixed in the room. We can hear a little bit of feedback noise. Maybe it's a little bit better right now, but we're working on it. Go ahead, Sandy.
I think it's a good opportunity, and I wonder if Ben or Elizabeth might comment. I did hear a board member just say when they saw the suspension number that it was lower than they thought. And it's a good example of when you focus on something, you can change the outcomes, and this is one of those categories. Elizabeth, you want to, or Ben?
I can speak to it. Over the past number of years, we had refined our practice to in order for us to occur. And then we even got more, more comprehensive in our query around the need or the rationale for the suspension. And again, we conferred. And through that conferring process, I will say that 4 out of 5 times, probably actually 8 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times, we don't end up with a suspension. When we do arrive at a suspension, it is pretty, it rises out of a need to do some pretty significant planning that we kind of need to be able to have time to plan for, and or it's a really, really significant behavior that we just got to kind of reshift our thinking and improve. So we've really been able to achieve quite a change in our protocol and our thinking. And we had a team of folks that did a lot of work around alternatives to suspension and have taken that work to heart. That was a group of assistant principals, other leaders across the district, and really developed that. And it kind of shifts your mind about, you know, and the other day I had a conversation that led to not a suspension. And it was like I said, what purpose will this suspension serve?
And maybe just by contrast, the numbers historically were much higher than this. Probably what? You know, this is a dramatic decrease in suspensions. So.
And I think I would just add that how much more our leaders are looking for effective interventions for our students. At the end of the day, I think that our leaders in our buildings and in our district office realize that in most cases, the most effective interventions, not a student sitting at home. In some cases, it might be appropriate, as Elizabeth just suggested, but we're really looking for what's the best solution to help redirect this behavior or whatever happened. And again, those interventions and solutions rarely come in the form of an out-of-school suspension without access to support.
This really sounds to me like very intentional effort to keep with, the motto, which is, responsive, innovative solutions. And knowing that students who are unique learners and have unique and special needs can come here, and that the staff here can deal with them and whatever it is they bring and work with them as opposed to trying to push them out. I'm glad to see it. And I think a lot of other people would appreciate it as well.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering, what do you think are the major reasons for lower attendance than expected? The rate seems a little low.
The rate is definitely, it's a big question, first of all. Invite other colleagues to jump in, and that alone is probably a whole board presentation. But I would agree with you in your take that we would want to see this higher than 66%. That is too low. I agree with you. So one, it is a different starting point. Again, many of our students come to us from a place where they didn't attend very well there either. And so we do have a starting place here. But I would say that the reasons why our students are not attending at the rate that we want them to and that they need to attend is probably really multi-factor, right? There's probably lots of different reasons, whether that be something that they're struggling with in their personal life, their mental health, their physical health, something related to COVID, something in the community, trauma. There's so many different reasons why a student might not be able to come into school that I don't know that I would want to try to answer that question on my own, because I do think it's so multifaceted. But all of those reasons and many more are contributing to why we're seeing students that are not attending as frequently as what we would like.
Do we have access to any comparative data of what our scholars' attendance rates were in their home districts?
We have access to that in an organized kind of way?
Not right now. No, I just think it would be interesting to see if they attend more like if the average was 50% and they come 66%, to me, that's says something. I was just curious.
We write that down for our meeting tomorrow.
Not that you need more work. I'm not asking you to do more work. I was just curious. Yeah.
It's a great idea.
I had another question about the free and reduced lunch rate. Is that based on applications that have been completed in the last 2 years? Or is it historical this year?
Yeah, I believe this is this year data that we're looking at. And yeah, this is another one. There's some fine print there as well, but we can asterisk this one a little bit too, because the not eligible, the almost 60% here and 40% eligible, this is only forms that have been turned in. And so if they didn't turn in that form, or it's not from a direct certification, then no, they're not showing up here. And we're sure that it's an undercount. It's the official record that we have, though, based on forms that were turned in.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen, steep declines in completion of that application across the state. Shouldn't need it. That's all I'll say. So that is based on just parents completing an application and not necessarily actual need within our school community, correct?
Correct. I think that's certainly another way to say it. The need is much greater than I think that what you're seeing here.
Thank you.
I have a question. If you go back to the last slide regarding the A reading and A math, what are the typical percentages that we see or in intermediate districts altogether in this state as far as comparable averages for A reading and A math? And like where do our numbers stand?
So this is the percentage of students hitting their target. And this is a combination, again, of two different academic screeners. One being the A reading and the other is the math, the reading math. I don't have, and maybe Annie, you can jump in here too. I don't have a comparison for you, and because I don't have that kind of combination data, A reading and A math, nor do I have one off the top of my head, even just math. Certainly it's low for the number of students reaching their target. There's no doubt about that, but I don't have a comparison.
I mean,
You want to
generally,
ballpark it?
yeah, generally in an MTSS system, you'd expect that your tier 1 is 80-ish% of your students meeting their targets and not needing more than the general curriculum, right? So if we're just assuming K-12 typical settings, you would think or want, if you're intervening correctly and using your resources in an allocation model like MTSS, that about 80% of your students would be chugging along in what you've chosen to do and meeting their targets, right? And then about 15% tier 2 need a little bit of help, and then the very top 5% are going to need really intensive intervention, and those would be who you'd expect to see red. Ours are flipped, generally speaking, right? That's backward from what I just said. We have about 20-ish% meeting what we would want as a target. This is just a fall target score too. It's not a growth metric. So this is just what happened with the A reading that we've done so far this year. The bulk of them are in the fall. So that's a little fuzzy too, but I would still expect the same thing in a K-12 district. You'd get about 80% of your students doing what you need them to do, just in tier 1, going along responding to your curriculum. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Looking around to see if there are any final questions or comments. I don't see any more. I just want to say thank you. I hope that your meeting tomorrow is inclusive of the great appreciation and admiration that we have for your work. So make sure that you take some time to talk about that in your meeting before what I'm sure is a laundry list of other things already on the agenda. And then like my main takeaway from this is that this is what I feel like the Minnesota State Report Card wants to be and is like so fundamentally far from becoming. So I appreciate this for what it says, for how real time it feels, and applaud you and hope that maybe this can be a model for our state and for others in the future. So thank you.
Thank you for having me and us tonight. And again, thank you to the entire team for your work on this project.
Introduce our next item.
Yes, I'm actually going to invite Ben and Tanya to come up to the podium. As you know, much of our work is centered around mental health, trauma, and healing-centered practices. And when I think back to the early days of the strategic plan, there would have been a very short presentation that occurred. And with Tanya's leadership now in mental health and family engagement, you can see a system starting to build across the district. And so I invited her and Ben to comment and explain what that snapshot looks like right now. There's still a lot of work to do, and I'm sure you'll hear about that, but exciting to see a system that's needed in the district around mental health. So Tanya and Ben.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to have a few more minutes with you tonight. This is, again, as Sandy just mentioned, kind of a two-part edition that I'm going to take the first 8 or 9 slides and talk about safety and our safety response over the last couple of months, and then I'll hand off to esteemed colleague, Ms. Allen, for the mental health part of the presentation. And again, learning intentions, just really want to make sure that by the end of this, that you can demonstrate an understanding of the progress that we've made to respond to school safety concerns within our community. And as Sandy mentioned, that you'll understand how we've organized, particularly for our students, but not just our students, our staff as well, our mental health supports. Just a little bit of background, that a safety response team was formed following the on-campus shooting at South Education Center on February 1st. We developed a team that has 11 members, including union leaders, safety leaders, mental health leaders, and Randy Johnson, the director of the Minnesota School Safety Center. And the team is really to lead our continued work on ensuring that an environment that is safe and feels safe to our students and our staff. The safety response team meets twice per month, every other week. I believe we've had about 5 different meetings so far this spring. From those meetings, that there are 4 themes that have emerged. One is that we have found ourselves reviewing our current safety practices. 2, that there was a need for training, and they've supported the coordination of those trainings. 3, that we wanted to make sure that as we go forward with this response, the voices of our students and staff and families were heard. And 4, supporting communication and website development. Those 4 buckets, those 4 areas of work are the themes that have come out of the last 4 or 5 meetings and likely to continue on into the future. I'm going to come back to each of these in the next slides as well. One of the first things that I think that we realized when we got together was that we could affirm that we really do have many layers of safety protection in place in our district. That we already have card access to get into the building. We have card access to get into doors. There's security cameras. We have incident command structures. We have a screening process. We have many layers of protection already in place. We also learned how important it was that we found ways to share knowledge with our staff across our community. That we could improve feelings of safety through improved communication and through sharing our knowledge about what to do before a crisis, during a crisis, and after a crisis. We also, through this team, we have been able to identify areas to improve. Just from really good conversations with the team that says, hey, what about this? For example, Someone suggested the other day, or asked the other day, about how do our new employees get access to our emergency response guide, a document that we have? And the answer was, I wasn't sure. But it led me to a conversation to walk down the hall to our human resources department, ask the same question. And that day we made sure that our onboarding process included referencing and bringing staff back to that emergency response guide. So things like that have come up in conversations with this team, that just good questions about, okay, I wonder about this, or how about this, has really helped us keep our work going forward. Staff training led by Jacob Horsch, our safety manager, Dina Sage, our senior manager of mental health, Brendan McDonald, one of our mental health clinicians, supported by Tanya as well, has been 15 different trainings that those leaders I just mentioned have put on across our district, or will put on still this spring. That their topics that were supported and identified and collaborated on in that safety team are what you see here: the incident command structure and how to operate in a lockdown, responding to specific scenarios about what would you do if X or Y happened, and Jake has tabletop exercises that he does. So that crisis prevention, how do we make sure that our universal practices are in place before we get to a crisis to prevent it before we even get there, and psychological trauma. So again, this partnership I mentioned in the last presentation is true here again, as our safety department and mental health department are collaborating even more than what maybe they did in the past. I mentioned too at the outset how important this part was, that the voice from our students and our staff and our families, that was something that we heard loud and clear that our stakeholders were looking for. So we found avenues like the Javas that Sandy does at our sites to collect qualitative data and feedback about how our staff are feeling about safety. And next up, and probably within the next week, hopefully, we have a survey that will go out to our students, our staff, and our families, asking about their feelings about safety and things that are going well and opportunities for improvement relative to safety in our district. The responses from that survey will come back to the safety response team for either decision-making or recommendation-making, depending on the topic. Lastly, before maybe I answer questions before we go to mental health, that we believe, and the team certainly believes, that regular, transparent communication on the process of this work is really important. To that end, Kristen Vogel and Rachel Hicks have led the development of that website. And we have all of our agendas and minutes from the meeting on our website, so our staff can access those and review them if they choose. We've started a more regular process of updating our staff, both on the safety strategies and layers of protection that we have in place, and also the updates from the team on a more regular basis. And lastly, within that team, we've just transparently talked about decision-making. In lots of cases, that team has the ability to make decisions, and other times it might be a recommendation, and I'll just be very transparent with them about which is which. And so when we get to a discussion, that we know where we're going to go next. So again, just transparent, regular communication about here's the process that we've established, here's where we're going next, and then some of the successes and things that we've been able to improve on kind of out of the gates. So before we go to mental health, maybe makes more sense for me to take safety-related questions now, and then I'll step out of the way for Tanya.
Questions or comments for Ben? Go ahead, Shannon.
I just had a question on the stakeholder engagement slide. I was wondering, are you collecting or centering student voice in any other way than a survey?
Not formally. Yeah, I think it would come through the other kind of informal feedback, either from teachers, and perhaps it's through teachers to the safety week. One of the things that we did to make, again, part of our transparency is saying, here's all 11 members of this team. And so some of that feedback may come through those team members and back to the safety response team. It may come in other informal sources, but no, not in any other formal way other than this survey.
Okay, thank you.
I was also going to ask about student participation. And I think a survey is a helpful step, but there are also a lot of barriers to survey participation for many students. So I think thinking about other ways that conversations could take place feels important and appealing to me. And then the one thing I was going to ask is just, and I apologize if I have missed this in my absence, but what the current status is with the Minnesota School Safety Center in terms of the work that they're doing, and whether their engagement with us really is through this group, or whether there is also going to be some sort of assessment or report if there's a product that they are producing as well. I feel like I'm just not sure where things stand with that.
We're not looking for a product from them. I don't believe that they're intending to make a product or a report to us. But we're really thankful for their partnership and their work with us along the way and providing us feedback and suggestions. That I mentioned Randy Johnson earlier. He actually came to, we hold our meetings at South Education Center, and he actually came in person to the first 2 meetings that we had. So he's a little bit more of a support from a distance now, but they've been a really good partner. And having him, especially in those first couple of meetings, has been really helpful, I think, for everybody to see an outside objective voice about the things that we're doing well and our opportunities for growth. So we still view them as a really important partner and thankful that they're as tied in with us as they are.
Okay, moving on to mental health.
Hello, everyone. Just to talk about our mental health work, as Ben mentioned earlier, when we think about the universal support model or our responsive systems of support, we look at that triangle at the bottom, and that purple is our universal things, and then our orange is representing what are some of our more targeted, and then that blue is our individualized support. And half of it, the way that it's on this visual, half of it is more academic centered, and so I'm going to be really speaking about the parts that are not so academic centered and more social emotional learning and some of the other things that we do within the district. So when we think about our universal and targeted approaches, looking at school-wide supports that we provide, one of the biggest things that we've been doing for a number of years, so this is not new work, but continuation, has been our restorative justice practices. And we've really worked to embed this practice in every site in all that we do. And some of the things that are most noted are our community building circles. So a lot of our sites start their day in circle and really just getting to, kind of take a pulse of where are our students at. And then we also have restorative chat. So kind of going back to the presentation before, when you're looking at what's happening with restrictive procedures or incidents that are occurring, looking at leveraging and taking the opportunity to have those restorative conversations when something does happen. So if there's a harm or a situation that impacts 2 students or a whole classroom full of students and staff, looking at using restorative chats to address that concern. In addition, we've really worked on beefing up our school family partnerships. So looking at what does that look like? Now, we've always done IEPs in this district, obviously, in our setting 4 programs, but that doesn't mean that we had a firm foundation of an understanding of what does that really mean to be in partnership with a parent, not just accessing them to come to an IEP meeting. So we've been really doing a lot of intentional work around doing that. In addition, I would say our trauma-informed approach in terms of some of the training and things that we've had, our neurosequential model in education and other trainings have been a part of that work. And then support for self-regulation. So really making sure that we have social emotional learning at all levels throughout all of our programs within the organization, and making sure that we access our social emotional learning coordinator to help provide support for those that are new coming into our system. And then as times change and needs change of our students, that we're making sure to address that through making changes to what type of SEL programming we're providing. One of the things that you may have heard about social emotional learning is just making sure that it's not white supremacy with a hug, and talking about how do we start to make sure that we're using culturally responsive, culturally relevant materials in our social emotional learning. So that's been a big part of that. And I also don't want to forget my colleagues who aren't named. We named Dina and we named Brenna, but we also have social workers, psychologists, counselors that are at all of our sites that are providing support to our students as well. So then when we think about our individualized supports, some of our individualized supports look like school-linked mental health providers, similar to what's in some of your districts as well. We continue our collaboration. This year we had to split our collaboration because of just resources in the community, but we continue our collaboration around psychiatric medication consults. And what that is that we've had for a number of years. I don't know how many exactly, but for as long as I can remember, psychiatric medication consults, because a lot of our students have some unique needs in terms of their medications, and sometimes those consults weren't happening. And so this has been a really good intervention to provide supports to those families that are kind of falling through the cracks, whether it's because they're homeless and highly mobile or other situations that are happening. We also continue to access case consultation with Hennepin County. So for some of our students that may need to be on a track for residential treatment programming or other out-of-home placement. And then because of our Project Aware grant, we have a Hennepin County Systems Navigator that has been increasing her usage. Her usage has been increased throughout the district, with some of our families that are really having difficulty, whether it's looking into a caddy waiver or other support services and supports that are needed. That's a part of what is offered at that individualized level. When we talk about our support for staff, because at the end of the day, if we're not supporting our staff, we really aren't supporting our students. And so when we think about that from a universal perspective, that's really been in our support of well-being action teams. So we have well-being action teams that are at each of our sites that help to kind of keep things going, whether that's different events or activities at the sites to really help everyone be thoughtful and mindful about what's going on and how are some things that we have in practice or could put into practice to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. The next targeted part is really looking at our employee assistance program, data and usage, to look at our employees accessing those supports when they need them. And if they're not, how do we increase people knowing about those services and supports, especially because of COVID? I think universally throughout the community, we hear about how high the needs are within communities. And then last but not least, some of our individualized support looks like supplementing gaps. So obviously our incident in February caused us to have a great need for more individualized support than what we had had previously. So we have been leveraging our partnership with Sand Creek Employee Assistance Program and their provider to come in and provide support for significant incidents. We've had a staff death, for those that don't know. We've had obviously the shooting, and we've had some other incidents that have happened with either current or previous staff that were significant enough to require some individualized support for staff. So we've really worked to do all of that to make sure that at the end of the day, we can make sure our students are doing well. So moving forward, I think that if you look on the left-hand side, when you talk about our organization and reactive, that we really are responsive, and that's a good thing. And it can be really difficult at the same time because we have to take the time to start to build in that level of being proactive and not just reactive to all the situations that are happening. So in the past, in 2019, for those that aren't aware, we did some work with Dr. Bruce Perry around the neurosequential model in education. And initially, we started this trauma leadership team. And obviously, since June of 2019 till now, we've lost some of those individuals that were trauma trained. And we recognized through our conversations as a trauma leadership team that although that group had a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, and we were working on spreading it, we were missing some key stakeholders at the table. We were missing having some of our ESPs as a part of that conversation. We were missing having teachers that are a part of it. And so even though they're not mental health professionals or practitioners, they're working with students with high needs, and we need their voice in the picture. We need our itinerant staff voice in the picture. We need special education staff that are working in that division in the picture. So where we're moving towards is a mental health leadership team that is just getting started, where we're looking at we're doing a SWOT analysis, looking at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then working to really hone in on where do we want to be when we start this upcoming fall? What are our priorities and where are we building from, given everything that everyone has experienced during COVID? So that's where we're moving towards at this point. At the end of the day, we also have a number of grants for those that don't know. And so we have been really working to leverage every bit of funding possible given the high needs that we've experienced. With Hennepin County, we have been really fortunate to have 4 of our sites continue to participate with the Shipmates program, which provides $1,000 per site to help address employee well-being. So sometimes that's bringing in a speaker to talk about an issue that's relevant to that school community. Or it could be just having a time to just get together in person because so many sites were not always in person with each other. The other piece is that Hennepin County helped fund youth mental health first aid to increase mental health literacy of our staff. So that's been something that we've really worked to do, is just to make sure that all staff have a working knowledge of when should I be moving or addressing this concern that I'm noticing to one of our mental health staff in the sites. We also have the STOP grant, which addresses some of our critical incidents and provides an opportunity for debriefing after those incidents, as well as training. Our Project Aware grant is our $425,000 grant that supports our senior manager and mental health position, as well as some other positions and opportunities to just build on the training and supports that we need to continue supporting mental health in our organization. And in process is the SERVES grant, and that grant is only available because, unfortunately, because of the incident that happened in February at South. So that's a federal government grant that will address some of the increased costs that we experienced as a result of that incident. So that is in process and should be, hopefully the draft will be submitted in the next week or so, and we should be working through that process. So I think at this time, any questions?
Thank you. Go ahead.
A quick question, the STOP grant, what was that one? Well, how much was that funding for?
$500,000 over an initial 3 years, I believe, and then we've, I'm sorry? Yeah. 3 years, and then we have been able to extend that.
So our usage, as you can imagine, was low during the pandemic because we weren't in person. So.
I have a question. Do we do any, like, in your social emotional learning, do we do any training for scholars on recognizing in other scholars, like suicide prevention type things, or how to deal with when you hear I keep wanting to say colleague, but one of the scholars in their class, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so we have looked into 2 different programs. There's a program that the state has that's called Friend to Friend, which is similar to Cognito, which is really helping to address suicide ideation and just awareness. We have not launched that yet. Part of our hesitation would be around the population that we serve and which group is that most appropriate for. Because some of our programs, it probably wouldn't cognitively be appropriate. And we also looked at teen mental health first aid. So there is a teen mental health first aid program that mirrors the youth mental health first aid program. However, you have to have so many people certified and trained before you're eligible to do that. And the teen mental health first aid program does just that. It helps teens to have a higher level of awareness of, I noticed my friend keeps saying this, I should go tell an adult. And so it's, so we've looked at that program, but you have to have, I think it's 10% of your organization or some measure that's already trained and fully, certified in that part before you can access the teen version of it. So we have looked at both of them, and it's a part of what will be on our discussion topic for our next steps with the mental health leadership team.
I just as a piggyback on that, I have a contact that has taught DBT at different middle schools. And I'm wondering if that's ever been a thought of, like, because you can get by with that as psychoeducation rather than therapy because it's more skills based.
Right.
That's something that, and dialectical behavioral therapy is what it's called, but it's very skills based.
Yes, we have, as a part of Project Aware, actually, that is the next, that is somewhat part of this year's work plan, but more looking at year 3, which is looking at some of the different programs. The way that Project Aware is set up, there are some recommendations that they have. So they actually look at a different one, which is called CBITS, Cognitive Behavioral Intervention Therapy in Schools. And then there's an elementary version, that's a middle school and high school version. And then there's an elementary version called Bounce Back. So it's similar to what's in DBT, but it's a little bit different program. So Project Aware has their recommendations. So we've been trying to make sure that we can mesh and build it together, and that we have capacity for people to go through those official training programs. And that has been difficult this year, given everything that's transpired this year. So our hope is that this summer we'll be able to kind of fill in the gaps with some of those training opportunities, given our turnover, to bring in some of that for next school year.
Thank you.
On restorative practices, that's something, we just had a great presentation sometime in the last few months on our board from the folks who are working on restorative practices in our district. And what really impacted my thinking about it was just how important it is to be doing that on the front end. And it really isn't, restorative practices is not just what is done, what we think of in the justice system, right? Like something has happened and now we're going to use restorative practices. That's no good if you haven't done it on the front end. So can you say a little bit more about how that is happening and who is trained and how that's kind of being, I don't know, filtered out throughout the district?
Yes. So I think initially when we first started back several years ago training people, a lot of the people that were trained were our mental health staff in schools. So more of our social workers, counselors, psychologists went through more of the 4-day, 3-day training. And in the last couple of years, I would say there are more ESPs and others that have been trained. This year, we took advantage of Nancy Riesenberg coming in to do a little bit of training with some of our education support professionals to just get them more built up in that. And this summer, our plan is to use some of our funding to do yet another version of that. Our goal is really to have more of our education support professionals take the lead on that. Not that we don't believe our teachers and our mental health staff can't do that, but often, like as you said, to be proactive, sometimes it can be very small. It doesn't need to be big. Our class sizes are smaller. So even if you're doing a circle with 3 students and getting them used to that practice on a daily basis. So a lot of what we've tried to do is to have that be a part of what mornings look like in a lot of our classrooms before those incidents happen, so that it isn't an unfamiliar practice. I think it's harder, what we've seen this is the past couple of years, it's harder when you have new staff that come in and they're already overwhelmed coming in a district like this. So we've really tried to focus on how can we leverage some of our education support professionals that have been here for a long time, that they can take the lead and lead those circles that are a part of that classroom morning procedure versus that teacher that may be brand new trying to figure out yet another thing. So that is something that we're really working on, prioritizing that group for that very reason. So that we do have some people that do it naturally. Some people feel very nervous and awkward about it, but we've been really working to get people more acclimated to that process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Janet.
Thanks for all this great information. I am wondering about the school linked mental health. Is that, I know that it's currently the funding for that is grant based. We're hoping that changes, but is that also part of the grants that you have to apply for, or do you have which community partner do you work with that gets the grants?
We work with a number of community partners, and it depends on which provider and which set of students they're working with. So for example, our students that are in our ALC programs that are accessing ALC Plus, that we have therapy services through either Headway or People Incorporated, they're funded, they're paid through a contract that Hennepin County manages, and so it's not the money is not given to us, it's given to Hennepin County, and then they contract with us for that. When I think about our other services, like our Kofi project with Wilder, that's a whole different funding stream. So it's separate funding streams for each one of them. The biggest challenge with school linked mental health services, which I'm sure is happening in your districts too, is just the lack of providers, period. So that has been yet another challenge this school year, is just having continuity of having providers for the year. So contract or no contract, grant or no grant, having consistency of providers present has been our biggest challenge this year.
Thank you.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for this great presentation. To Ben, too. I just wondered about family engagement. Is that a thing?
It is a thing. It wasn't part of this presentation, but yes, we have a family literacy specialist, and we also have an innovative instructional coach that focuses on family engagement. And the work that he has been doing has been throughout the organization in a variety of ways that may seem like they don't match, but they do. One of those things is, for those that know about Nexus, which I think presented a while back, he's been really a part of that team. His background is in school psychology. So he's been part of that team to really work on and talk through what does that reintegration look like. So being able to be there at the table and a part of what that looks like, and then being able to talk to colleagues about what that work looks like in the buildings. He also is the go-to for those events that are coming up. So next week, Ann Bremer has a family engagement event. He's often doing tabling. He's often going out and just interacting with those teams at sites, providing training, working with some of our itinerant staff on what does family engagement look like. So if I'm an audiologist, what am I doing, or what could I do differently when I think about family engagement than our staff that are in buildings that have more of a traditional role. So that's a part of what we do in our department is work to have one-on-one sometimes with staff, but then to also do some bigger group trainings and be present at sites, really engaging and connecting. We've offered to be at intake meetings and try to be a part of a lot of different things to build our capacity around understanding what are some of the barriers we need to help remove. We've partnered with PACER this year and tried to do things. Our biggest challenge is, and we've had this challenge as long as I've been in the district since 2011, is getting people more comfortable with coming. You know, I think that it's, you know, what I witnessed as a principal before this role is just, there's a lot of grieving when you have a child come to 287, and it takes time. I mean, I think the parents that I probably had the strongest connection with, it probably took me 3 to 4 years to build it. And so I think that sometimes and then with COVID, it really hampered that development happening on a deeper level. But when you get to be face-to-face with people, I feel like we've really worked to build strong connections. Last year, when the COVID numbers have been low, my team is actually, we have a family literacy specialist. She's actually been able to go out and meet people out in the community and talk about literacy with their kids. And so those are some of the things that I'm like really happy about. And I know we need to continue to work on that as we move forward. So that'll be a part of what we do, not part of this presentation, but part of what we do. Yes.
Thank you. And I didn't mean that I didn't expect you had.
I know you didn't mean that.
Came out a little backwards. But thank you so much. And I had no doubt that things were going as to plan.
I have to say thank you so much for presenting what is a chunk, a huge amount of information, and you kind of brought it down into bite-sized amounts. I don't have any specific questions because I feel like you really did a good job of explaining for me and everybody some of the different things that are available, the process to figuring out what's needed, getting different kinds of streams of funding, different methods of ensuring that there's no staff that aren't having their unique needs met, as well as making sure they have the support so students have their support. And I can see that there's multiple levels of this and a very thoughtful and thorough process. And it seems like you're regularly reevaluating and reassessing and looking for ways to do it better. So, you know, even though I'm not a mental health specialist, and so I can't like get into the nitty gritty and critique it, I believe I see a very thorough process and many pieces in place that make me feel reassured that you're doing all of the right stuff. So thank you.
Well, while not our intent tonight, you really did get probably at least 2/3 of the strategic plan report that you'll probably get in the coming months. So it really was a broad-based set of information you received. And so I appreciate both Ben and Tanya and other colleagues who worked hard to put that together. And certainly if you have any follow-up questions, you can always reach out to any of us for that.
Thank you. Very thorough, very impressive. Thanks to you both.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is a financial report from May Hawkins, our Executive Director of Business Services, who's going to share with us some information about our current budget reduction process.
Well, good evening, Chair Brackey and board members. First, I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the information that is on the What the Board Needs to Know 2022-23 Budget Reductions document. Then I'll open up the floor for some questions. So planning for the 2022-23 budget reductions started in October when we realized that our fall enrollment was lower than what we were projecting and hoping for. With that early start, many of the position reductions were able to be achieved by not filling positions as they came open. Important to note, there are no unrequested leaves of absences of tenured staff needed as part of the staffing reductions. As decisions are and continue to be made, we will follow the board-approved FY23 budget assumptions. The first expenditure assumption is expenditures will be aligned and prioritized to promote the district's strategic priorities, student outcomes, racial equity, evidence-based instruction, trauma-responsive and healing-centered practices, and employee well-being. And you've had reports on many of those tonight. To assist decision makers in racial equity-centered decision-making, a new tool called the Budget Request Reduction Equity Assessment, or BREA, is being piloted during the 22-23 school year budgeting process. The BREA asks many of the same questions as the Racial Equity Impact Analysis tool with a budget decision focus. The largest contributing factor to the need for reductions is the continued decline in the number of student enrollments. As enrollment declines, so do revenues, and we have used the district's fund balance reserves during the uncertain times caused by the pandemic. So now we must bring our expenditures down to match our revenues. The revised budget for 21-22 shows the use of $2.98 million, or 15% of the general fund balance reserves, to offset lower than anticipated revenues due to fewer student enrollments. The total district-wide reductions for the upcoming school year is $3.1 million. These reductions are in several categories, as we're a complex district with lots of different programs and lots of different funding sources, as you've heard. So the first category is district-wide administration and operations. The reductions for that category are $800,752, which is 6.1% of that budget. Our compensatory education fund, as we heard earlier from our data dashboard, our applications for free and reduced are down just like everyone else's. So a combination of that plus a reduced enrollment means that our revenue for compensatory education is dropping by $334,233 for the upcoming school year, which is a 22% drop in that revenue. Our ALC programs have changes reflecting their changes in enrollment, and that is a $467,642 reduction, or 4.7% of their budget. That includes the closing of the Early Learning Center at North Education Center that we discussed during the adoption of the budget estimates. Our special education programs have $1.3 million in reductions, which is approximately 2.5% of that budget. And then we have reduction of contracted services, which were previously funded either by grants or fund balance of about $195,000. While 3.1 million is a large number, it represents 3.5% of our total general fund budget. Many of the administrative and operational departments of the district are in the process of reorganizing or have already reorganized their duties and shifted responsibilities around to the remaining staff members due to when staff left, their positions were not filled, they were cut. So the list of administrative operational position reductions and contracted services reductions is shown at the bottom of the document. As the instructional programs are currently working on their staffing, and if any staff are impacted, they will be notified by mid-May. We will provide more information about instructional budget changes after mid-May. Does the board have any questions?
Thank you, May. Questions or comments from the board? Sam, go ahead.
Thank you for the report, Ms. Hawkins. I know this has been on our mind since the fall, and 3.1 is, it's concerning to me, especially, with the type of students that we educate. I was curious to know then if the administration has thought about other ways to increase revenue, for example, the fees to member districts.
It's a balancing act.
Yes, that's why I ask, yes.
Right? Because these member districts, then member districts are doing some more analysis about, okay, if I send a student to District 287, it costs X, right? So maybe I don't send the student, right? And then your enrollment continues, right? Not to be flat or to decline, right? So there's a balance.
I understand that, but so just from my experience, I can only speak for Robbinsdale, and I feel like this is a serious conversation we should have as a board, because when I got on here, we were flipped. 287's budget and unassigned fund balances looked great, and we're really doing bad in Robbinsdale, and we had to make a lot of cuts, and we had to, reorganize as well, and now I feel like we're flipped. We're doing really well in Robbinsdale. We have about a 6.5% unassigned fund balance percentage increase. We've made some cuts. We got a lot of ESSER funding as well as rest of member districts, and 287 was unable to get those types of funds. Being that those funds are available to all of us as member districts, I feel that we need to help support. I'm speaking again for myself with Robbinsdale, but these are we're educating our most vulnerable children, and that's why I'm just concerned with these types of cuts. And if we can help in any sort of way, I'm bringing that to the table. That if we have to have increase in cost to member districts, I think that's something that should be discussed.
I really appreciate you bringing up the thoughts, and May gave a good response. It really is a challenging situation. And we know that the students coming to us have needs that have compounded during the pandemic. I think that it certainly could and should be a conversation to be considered going forward. We have spent more time this year, starting with the beginning of the school year, on budget than I ever remember. And that's because it's very complicated and very challenging. And the compounding effect of not getting equal ESSER funds has been a major factor in that. I think one thing that we will all wait for is the end of the legislative sessions to see if we get any relief on a variety of fronts. But should that not come through, I think there will be more conversations that will be needed. There's a new strategic plan that's probably going to be around the corner. And having those kind of authentic and heart-to-heart conversations with our member districts will be in order.
If I can add one thing, and I would ask Sandy and May to correct me immediately if I have any of this wrong. The impression I've gotten is that there has actually been a fairly consistent across finance directors and superintendents charged to not increase the cost. And so I think if individual board members disagree with that, then it is our responsibility to talk to our superintendents and our finance director. So I think that if that is how people individually feel and we collectively as feel, then we need to be having those conversations, because I think May and Sandy have been having the conversations for many months now. And that has, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the message has been fairly clearly communicated to us that member districts do not want their fees to increase. Is that accurate?
I would include the special ed director.
Great. Yes, thank you.
I would just add, and maybe just as perspective, as many of you know, I did share a memo with you that was sent to superintendents that summarized and gave perspectives to some of the questions that had come up in a superintendent meeting. and purposely then reached out to superintendents to see if they had any further questions or concerns. And that went to business directors and special ed directors as well. In my survey of people, I did not get any further questions or concerns. The information seemed to answer the questions they had. I would say, maybe just to clarify, I have not had superintendents reach out to me and say, you need to cut your costs as a group. That has not occurred. I think that as long as that my tenure in the district is, there's always the sense that we are a high-cost district, which is true because kids coming to us have very high needs, and that's going to translate to increased costs. So I think consumers of that would always prefer not to have costs go up. But I do remember conversations in our original strategic plan about the importance of being, as an intermediate, to be able to have conversations with our member districts about what do you need us to do, and then we have to be able to say, we can do that and it will cost about this much. Because there is a point where we have to be very honest and open about the cost of providing an educational program to young people that have the needs that are coming through our door. And I think if we were to repeat this in a coming year, it would be a really, really, really almost impossible kind of thing to do from my vantage point. So that's just my free-flowing thoughts about this.
Ruthie, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wondering the results. I know you had staff to pull together a comparison of salaries of the personnel and everything for District 287. I didn't hear the results of that because wasn't that, those were comments coming from the superintendent that they recommended you cut the salary of the staffing, certain staff?
To be clear, there was only one district superintendent who brought up salaries. Okay.
Only one?
Correct.
But it represented the group, right? The group's thinking?
I do not know that, and nor did they say that. So I can't answer it beyond that, Ruthie.
A spreadsheet was sent to our email, though. There was a spreadsheet that May and her team compiled that had a lot of comparison information, and that was emailed to us. Is that what you're referencing?
Right, and I thought there were going to be a meeting around that, getting that information back to them so they could discuss it more. Because that was one of the recommendations I thought for cutting your budget, making cuts in your budget.
I'm not sure I can answer that. What I experienced is at a superintendent meeting, one superintendent brought up the cost of a certain category of staff. And in response to that, we put out a summary email that did some comparison off the Minnesota report card, because that was something we could neutrally bring in from the outside that would show how we stood in terms of leaders to instructional staff, and not salaries. But that showed we were neither leading nor lagging amongst our member districts. And then I sent out an email to all superintendents with that information, invited more questions and concerns, and followed up with everybody and did not get any.
Interesting.
I think the other thing that I would just mention is that in terms of salary scope, we have done consistently surveys, frankly, just for our own benefit and trying to do compensation packages for all types of employees over the years to again, stay in that neither lead nor lag kind of range. And that has been purposeful in all our negotiation and compensation packages. And so I feel like if districts wanted those comparisons, we certainly could give them more information, but I have not been asked for that.
Okay. I'll have to talk to our superintendent some more.
Okay.
She seemed to Maybe she was the one that brought it up. I
No,
don't know.
it was not.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
I do think this is a valuable conversation because there's lots of conversations can yield information which frankly is important information, but also sometimes gets confused. So to the extent that I can clarify it, I'm happy to do that.
And just first, that was a really helpful spreadsheet, and I shared it with, I talked about it with our superintendent and shared it with my board. It was, I think, helpful for lots of different reasons, not just looking at 287. So for what it's worth. My question is, in the wonderful eventuality, like that we get a bunch of money from the state, if we did, would that change any of these reductions, or would that go to balancing in the future?
So historically, the legislature hasn't been completed in May, so that you could actually put those revenues into your budget that comes to your board in June. So anything more than likely, seeing as how far apart they are currently, it will probably be June. Or we know, right? And that will be too late to be included in our original budget, so we will adapt and change the revised budget as those new incomes. So anything that is enacted right already, we have incorporated into our overall budget. But bills that are not passed yet, of course, we cannot.
So would there be any plan to, if they can't comment, to sort of replace any of the things that are reduced here?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay.
And I've mentioned this in other meetings of this legislative session. Again, anybody's guess is worth anybody else's, but we have more pending possibilities this year, significantly more than we have in any other year. And particularly the last legislative session was probably one of the least fruitful for intermediates of any I've experienced. So to your point, that really played into this year's budget in that we got very little legislative help compared to other districts, K-12 districts. So hopefully there will be a reversal or at least a shift in that, but one never knows.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
I'm just saying, I think, there's a way to be creative here. Like I said, 3.1 million, I mean, we don't have to try to recapture all of that, but if we can at least mitigate the reductions in half even, again, amongst 11 member districts, it's pretty manageable, I feel like, to end with that. As far as the ESSER funding, we're concerned, that we can't even use it all because it has to be used for certain things or certain categories that we have for funding. And my thought is then that if we can't use it all, we could maybe use it in a way that benefits 287. Is that a possibility? That could be a creative way?
I would talk to Rob. I would need to talk to Rob, Dale's business manager about.
I mean, all of our member districts.
Yeah, I know.
ESSER funding.
But you're the only district that I've heard that.
Not all of it. We're using it, but there's some that we might not be able to use it all. And if we can, divert it and shift it in a way that's still used for the same category it's supposed to be used for, but it's at 287, why not? It's still, funding for education and used for what it's supposed to be used for.
Well, I think I have heard districts around the state that have had similar situations, which is unheard of, right? In most of our careers to have that kind of situation. I think if I think we're moving forward with this the best we can. We're hoping for legislative relief. I think there should be a conversation in the coming year or two as the situation continues. We know the needs of kids are not getting smaller. We know that there are not sufficient mental health placements in the community for kids, and so kids are still coming to school with significant needs. And so it is definitely something to keep the pulse on, and I appreciate just the insight that you bring. And maybe in the next year, it'd be good to just get data on when fees have been increased over time to get some perspective. about how long certain, like the core fee, for example, how long that stayed the same and has it reflected inflationary kind of increases. That might be a good base conversation for the board.
And so just to be clear, I mean, this 3.1 million is to offset what we're currently spending on a fund balance. Right? It doesn't mean that there won't be any increases, right? There'll be an inflationary increase to member districts as well. So this doesn't offset any inflationary increase. This offsets the expenditures that we had in place because we believed our enrollment was going to come back up to 490 students, and it didn't.
I will say that kind of connects to, I personally, all of these cuts are deeply painful and are not what any of us want. It is easier for me to understand cuts that are rooted in enrollment and the fact that we simply do not have the students that we anticipated that we were going to have. That is an easier thing for me to make sense of, even while I wish that it was not the reality that we were in. The 22.31% that's around compensatory education, that is a difficult one for me to get okay with, because as we talked about earlier, we actually don't have any indication that that is real loss. It is just a response to who is filling out a form and turning it in. And the motivations for filling out those forms and turning them in have been different for the last several years. And so that is one that is very hard for me to be okay with, where at least the other ones I can more intellectually understand that that's why we are where we are.
I just wanted to make a plug for advocacy at the state level. There is a bill that would sever compensatory funding from the free and educational benefits application that we make parents fill out. So call all your representatives, tell them that that bill needs to pass. It's been watered down a little bit, but it's still a good bill, and it would make it much easier and a more robust community eligibility provision. So that would help a lot of school districts not be in this situation year after year.
Do you know the bill's number or name?
I do not have that information in front of me, but I'm happy to send it out to the board if you're interested.
Yeah, because if we call our state reps and we tell them this, they'll ask us what is the person who answers will ask for either the name or the number of the bill. Usually they need the number so they can help find it.
Yeah, I think they all know if you say compensatory funding, but I will definitely send that information to you.
It's a good segue for me to just add that we probably will be coming to you to contact your legislators in the coming weeks. Actually, Ewald and Valerie, who you met as our lobbyists here a few weeks ago, they have a new electronic system that's much easier than trying to figure out each time a bill you want passed to write your own letter, make your own contact. It will make it a much easier push to get your voice to your legislator in the coming weeks. So you can expect that as we near the end of the session, at least on our intermediate bills.
Great. And thank you for sharing that, Shannon. That would be great. Any other questions or comments for May?
I have a question related to the positions not being filled. The executive director, is that Chad's position?
Yes.
And I might have missed this because I was gone, but how are his duties being transferred to others?
Yeah. So as I said, we've talked about this before for months about what budget cuts and how much do we try to reduce in each department. We had contingency plans. Chad's resignation came rather suddenly, and he only gave a 2-week notice, but it did give us an opportunity then to reconsider his position. There's many parts to what Chad was doing. Certainly a lot of the technology related things are falling to Kim. On an interim basis, Kim is reporting to Elizabeth. The other piece of major piece of Chad's work was around safety and security. And so in the interim till July 1, that department is reporting to Ben. And then communication, which had a line from Chad, Rachel's position. Rachel actually is on the screen. I shouldn't talk about her as a position. Had a dotted line to me and to Chad. And so Rachel's reporting to me. And then we've talked to Marcy about that after July 1, she can take a more permanent look at it from her perspective. But in the interim, those people are reporting to one of us that you see here tonight. It's an important question though, and it is referenced in that memo. Workload and work balance is very timely. It's being talked about everywhere, right? And I'm very cautious about our leaders. It's very hard to find leaders in general in public education right now. And finding specialized leaders in a district like an intermediate is very important. So I'm very sensitive to the workloads that have been transferred. And I think we'll have to watch that in the coming months and coming year.
Yeah, I think I would speak for all of us when I would say it's not just, oh, the work is going to be reassigned to a smaller group of people, but rather the work needs to be reevaluated and some things need to stop being done so that our people actually do have the ability and the capacity to do their roles, do them well, and live lives that they are happy and satisfied with. So it's not just reassigning, but it's reevaluating.
Well said.
Okay, I don't see any other questions or comments. So we will move on to the board business section of the agenda. There is a memo for the board in our packet on what the board needs to know about the National School Board Association annual conference that 3 of our leaders were able to attend and present it. So Sandy, is there anything that you would like to share about that? And I see Radius is with us, and she is one of those who was with you.
Great, thank you. And I think what the board needs to know document is self-explanatory. But I think it's fair to say that Theon, Radius, and I were very pleased by the audience response that we received. I've said to some of you, we were presenting at 8 a.m. on the last half day of the conference. So our guess as to how many people were going to be in the room was the numbers were small. And all of a sudden people came flooding in just before 8 o'clock, and it was very gratifying. But even more gratifying was the response to our suggestion that they ask questions as we did the presentation. And frankly, we couldn't keep up with the questions. We didn't get through the entire presentation. There were so many questions and good questions that we definitely felt that we hit a timely issue for board members. And we had actually follow-up inquiries after that. There's the superintendent from Los Angeles Public Schools has actually set up a meeting with us next week to talk further about the model. Inquiries from Tacoma, Washington, Madison, Wisconsin, which is where Dr. Jenkins is, and I talked to him, but I also had 2 of his board members in the session. They followed up. I'm sure there's going to be more discussion, and that was just a sample of the kinds of questions that and responses that we received. I think what I would sum it up to say the readiness for change is significantly different than it was when we started this model in 2017. And based on that audience, I think we're going to see more work around the country. They were particularly wanting to know about how do you do it? We're interested, we want to do it, but how did you do it again? And so we did the best we could. Radius, do you want to add to that, please?
No, Sandy, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
I will say that I think it was Tacoma, Washington reached out to me just yesterday because unfortunately, Theon and I probably had more airtime than Radius did with her racial equity analysis tools work, but she got it in, and they followed up and wanted to have more contact with her about the racial equity work that we're doing in the district. So Very interesting, very gratifying audience to be before.
The next updates are related to our face covering policy and gender inclusion policy, or progress towards a gender inclusion policy. And again, there are written updates in the board packet on both of those from Sandy. Do you want to do any overview, or we could also just open it immediately for questions or comments that people have about the updates?
I think that's fine. And Ann Becker actually did write the memo for us and is central to those policies. So she probably is in an even better position than I to answer any questions, but we're happy to do so. We just wanted to update the board and keep you current on those two areas.
Any questions or comments on either the approach to the face covering policy or the status of the gender inclusion policy?
I appreciate the update.
Likewise. Okay, seeing none, and it's okay if people are still looking, but I'll just draw people's attention to the April 22 AMSD Connections newsletter that is also part of the board packet. As I have missed the last several 287 meetings, I also have missed the last several AMSD meetings while I was away. So I don't know if there's any other AMSD updates that anybody would like to share who potentially has been present for meetings. Just looking to others.
There was a presentation last week about the Department of Education's literacy, all the different literacy initiatives, I guess, and just kind of legislative update generally.
Thank you. The remaining items on the agenda are just our regular calendars. One thing that I would like to call attention to is that the final Local 2209 board breakfast is on Tuesday, April 26th. So please do let Juanine know if you plan to attend. Juanine or Sandy, is that a in-person, virtual, or hybrid meeting?
My best answer would be that it's hybrid. I think the staff have found that doing it virtually and then still being in their sites on time works better for them. So I think we'll update you as we get closer, but I think you can feel if you'd like to be in person or virtual, let me know as board members and we can accommodate that either way.
Great, thank you. And then Juanine also asked me to let people know that there will be an in-person retirement celebration for our 2022 retirees. And to let Juanine know if you plan to attend that. Do we have a date for that yet? May 26th. Okay, so just note that on your calendars and let Juanine know if you would like to attend. So that brings us to once around the table, which is just an opportunity for any updates that people would like to share with each other. Is there anything that folks would like to bring to the table? Go ahead, Sam.
Not an update that I'd like, or that I would like to share, but the superintendent, can we get an update, I guess, for the Jamari Rice family and the other student that was involved in the altercation? How are they all doing?
Yeah, thank you. We do, I think if the second student who was hospitalized is returning to school, so that's a good news. He may have started this week or next week.
I believe he's back.
Okay, so that's very good news. And we're happy to have him back. We've not had ongoing contact with Jamari's family, but actually it's a good prompt for me to reach out to the family. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Anne.
Just a quick update on, I think at the last meeting or the meeting before I shared that we were getting 2 new board members, and I had the opportunity and privilege to swear them in just 2 nights ago on Tuesday. So we are a full board of 7 again, full strength, and we're ready to roll. So that's been just fantastic. It feels really good.
Congratulations.
After losing 2 board members, so
congratulations. Michelle.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to report that I have an official yes to our LFMT, from Orono. They'll be voting on the resolution on May 9th. So I can't be there because I'll be elsewhere. but I'm happy to say the business director gave me the go-ahead, so hope it sticks.
And we believe, I think, May, that that's the case for all districts at this point.
Shannon, did I see your hand? And then I think Sandy, you as well?
Yes. Well, I just wanted to share some good news from Hopkins. We, at the NSBA conference, received the Silver Magna Award for our work centering student voice through the Royal Rep program. So Steve brought back the plaque from the conference and accolades for your presentation. He was very impressed with all of it and with the crowd and the questions. So thank you for representing 87.
It was as cool there in San Diego, not temperature-wise, but it was cool during the period we were there too. So we didn't get a lot of warmth on our NSBA trip. Still a good trip.
But it wasn't 32 degrees and
It
snowing.
was not, and it was
Okay,
not.
then. It was a win.
I just wanted to mention, I mentioned this to Crystal yesterday. I received, out of the blue, I still don't really understand it. I'm hoping it means something positive, but was invited to Governor Walz's State of the Union address a week from Sunday night, both the reception and the speech. My hope is that somehow it represents that they remember we have a lot of legislative things out there that we hope to get approved, but I'll share more after I attend. So.
Everybody mark your calendars, because I'm betting Sandy's going to be on TV or mentioned.
Yes.
Well, and thank the governor and the administration for including school meals in there.
Okay.
That's the 24th.
Project to push for what
Including what?
they need to
Nutrition.
make happen too. Thank you, and then what need.
Right.
Part of our platform.
Go ahead, Francesca, please.
So I wanted to share that we are almost halfway through the month of Ramadan. So a lot of Muslims are fasting from about an hour and a half before sunrise until sunset. So I'm one of them. So Ramadan Kareem to anybody who's also fasting. I know there's a lot of students in high school, middle school, and then some elementary school students who fast as well. And so just I'm sure the teachers are well aware, but just extra awareness in case you see somebody not eating lunch, that could probably be it. You can always ask. And it concludes, I think it's going to be like May 2nd or May 3rd. And then we have our 3-day holiday of Eid. So we're really looking forward to it. It's like Christmas, Easter, Hanukkah, all the things put into one, and you get to eat in the sunlight again.
Also, if I can piggyback on that, we have a lot of students that are taking MCA tests and other ISTICs.
While fasting. Yeah.
While fasting.
On the bright side, they score really well. A lot of people report, my kids think they did even better because there's something about fasting. You do get tired, but it gives you this kind of increased focus. And one of them has mild ADHD and she feels the same way.
Well, the thing that I was just going to share was just appreciation, in particular to Shannon and Regina for stepping in and leading the 2 meetings during my absence. I had a very restorative and wonderful 6 weeks away. So thank you for everybody for understanding that I was going to be away for a little while. So I appreciate that a lot. And with that, I believe our meeting has come to an end. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I will give the motion to Michelle Kuntz, the second to Francesca Pagan Umar.
Oh, it was
I'm sorry,
Anne. It was
Katie. I misidentified the voice to my left. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye, and the meeting is adjourned at 8:39 p.m. Have a good night, everybody.
Very good.
It was so nice. It was so nice of you,
Crystal,
Jackie, to mention
so
that.
I
because a lot
heard,
of people
Maria
forget,
Gonzalez is not running
like
for
the kids
re-election.
are fasting, like the people
How
who
come?
schedule the
She was in
tests.
her